Good day, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is that you're listening to this. If you're here on the premiere, it's good evening. Thank you very much for being here. This is part 12 of The Wisdom of the Fourth Way by Rebecca and Theodore Nottingham. And also, just before I start, it turns out, after doing a little bit of research into Maurice Nicole, or actually Henry Maurice Nicole, or actually Henry Maurice Dunlop Nicole, he was born in Kelso, Scotland, and I've been doing his voice with this funny, very bad French accent because I made the assumption that Maurice Nicole was from France. And he's not. He's from Bonnie, Scotland. So from now on, Mr. Nicole will be played by one of my Scottish counterparts, or the Scottish side of my ego. And to be quite frank with you, I'm quite happy about that because it's much easier than doing the Scottish accent's much easier than doing the French accent, which I fucking hate. Question. I have many selfish eyes. I observe them in various roles. They stem from my instinctive centre and perhaps from the way my personality was formed. That is a common observation that I make, that I'm thinking about myself, worrying about myself, etc. False personality is strong in this area, and it seems hard to step ahead of it, so to speak. Can you suggest how to work on this? Response. Gurdjieff called the instinctive centre the boss. It will tyrannize all other centres until it is satisfied. For instance, if your instinctive centre is exhausted, your intellectual centre will not work. Your emotional centre won't care about anything except satisfying the instinctive centre's needs. You have to work with it intentionally, making compromises and rewarding it for cooperating. As for selfishness, it is the normal state of a sleeping machine. Self-interest is behind almost every word and deed. It requires a great deal of long-term observation and dedication to change, to become unselfish, and it is worth it. Keep working for it. Well, to be existential, this moment is all we have. I'm glad you're willing to do the work now. I hope that you will develop a commitment to doing the work because of the results you get and the valuation of those results. Nicole.
Through self-observation, light enters, and it is this light that begins to separate us. Esoteric teaching is light, but only when it is understood, valued, and applied. You will get no light without this valuation. We cannot understand the word ideas unless we work on ourselves. Your being will not change if you are completely identified with yourself. If there's no change of being, then there can be no change in your understanding of the work. Self-observation lets a ray of light in. This light is called in the work consciousness. The objective of this work is to increase consciousness.
The awareness that is intentionally separated out in order to practice self-observation is not thought. It is not intellectual, though it is intelligent seeing. If you are thinking about the exercise, then be aware that there are such eyes circulating within you. Question.
I notice that the ascendancy of certain of the many eyes can correspond to moving center habits and attitudes. When I slump in my chair, my attitude changes. When I keep a toothpick in my mouth, my attitude changes. Can moving center be employed to elicit work eyes?
Response: absolutely. Habitual postures generate habitual emotional states. For instance, if your reflective stance or body language is a bowed head, perhaps stroking your face or crossing your arms, pacing, all of these things, if they are habits associated to particular states, in this case, let's say brooding, then you can have an impact on that negative state by changing the habitual posture that unconsciously associates to it. You will find, in a general sense, that when you still yourself and your mind, take a deep breath and relax your muscles, that other influences can enter. External factors can create certain eyes. If you're asleep, this is all that will happen. What happens in the work that has an impact is the transformative power of the psychological practices. The physical phenomenon that you have referred to happens all the time. Sensations create emotion. There should be enough self-observation going on to do more than sense through the body. Much greater effort is called for than sensing or being aware of your body. This focus is too narrow and a side issue. When you begin to make real progress in self-observation, it is common to feel like you are getting worse because you are seeing more. Don't let this confuse you. Question: as I practice self-observation and see better my own weaknesses and falsity, I become more aware of these things in others as well. How can I work to avoid using these insights about others in a wrong way? Response: try dealing with these insights without identification. Awakening from sleep will give you compassion. Observe others and their sleeping mechanics, and you will find empathy with that position. This will allow you to forgive them for their wrong work, for they know not what they do. The following is a list of the important points in observing inner talk. The most important of all is that when you are talking, you are not listening to what may be available. Associative thinking, psychological attitudes and dispositions that recur, patterns of connected eyes, the taste of your inner state, where your attention is, the power of imagination. Almost all inner talk is imagination. The constant reinforcement of attitudes and opinions through indiscriminate thought processes, identifications and justifications. The most important point, once again, is that there is no silence. You cannot hear.
Sometimes I think that if I have observed a thing once in my life, that I can then move on to something else. Should I not strive to make continued and repeated observations of the same things?
Response: if you make continued and repeated observations, you will begin to see the same things. There is a point to this. The point being that at this stage, the same things keep happening whether you want them to or not, or whether you observe them or not. Question:
in that commentary, Nicole speaks of preparing a work aim that will save you from going to Soho in yourself. What does this mean?
Response. It means that you have recognized a group of habitual eyes that take you to the slums of your psychology, and you make a work aim to refuse to go with them. It's partly a matter of cultivating the better eyes in yourself and turning your attention in another direction. The practice of inner silence can also be of great help regarding habitual groups of eyes. In our ordinary state of consciousness, thoughts come from all around us, inside and out, without discretion or reason. Noticing what thoughts we have, especially repeated sets of eyes that have their own personality and agenda, it is a critical first step in choosing what we give our attention to. If we let our flow of thoughts go unobserved, unchecked, then we remain under their power and completely asleep. You need to recognize what thoughts are helpful to the work and the right functioning of your psychology, and what thoughts are harmful to the work and to yourself. Then you try to select what the work teaches you to select. Not all eyes are from false personality. That is why we have to observe and identify them in order to separate from what is false and nurture what is genuine. Question.
First, I practically tried to examine what is observing eye in me, as recently as a few minutes ago. The question is crucial and unavoidable, in my opinion, for anyone involved in the work. I take it seriously. Having said that, I do not know what observing eye is. I must study, reflect, struggle with this for a long time. It is the classic question asked of the seeker: who am I? I can tell you that I'm not the functions of the machine. I can tell you that I'm only accessible when I am separated from the functions. Second, more theoretically, I think that observing eye is related to conscience.
Response. The object of defining what it is that is observing in you is to increase its presence. To sense the taste of it helps define it. This part of you that is observing is not one of the many eyes. It has a different quality that is detached. It has a different perspective, and it feels more like something authentic in you that is you, not imaginary eye. Observing eye is connected to buried conscience. Buried conscience emerges during the process, the work. Question. I kept asking myself the question, what is it that is observing? As I tried to ponder this question seriously, I noticed that what was observing gained force. At first, I concluded that the answer was consciousness. Then I concluded that it is Gurdjieff's embryo. Woe to him who has it in embryo. Response. Observing eye, gaining force and definition, is the point of the exercise of examining it. I would not call it consciousness. It is something more like a place in you where real eye begins to grow. Actually, it is more spiritual than psychological in nature, something akin to your soul. Question.
Through observation, I believe I can see various aspects of my psychology. How then can I more aggressively confront my psychology? That is, how can I bring more pressure to bear to expose difficulties and overcome them? Should I work more aggressively or just take opportunities as they arise?
Response. Take the opportunities as they arise. You will recall Nicole saying that you cannot work in an identified way, anxious and trying to force results. I don't want you to aggressively confront your psychology. I want you to passively observe it and try to define what is real I in it and what is acquired personality and inauthentic to your being. The most aggressive you should be with yourself is in repressing false personality and making it passive. This is the beginning of inner separation, which is the long, hard work of cleansing the emotional center. Your present psychology, which is mostly made up of false personality, is full of the attitudes and opinions, likes and dislikes, and multiple I's that you have acquired. These I's that you have observed verify for you that your personality is full of them. They need to be made passive so that the work can be active. The idea that self-observation is active, intentional, directed attention, whereas knowing and thinking are passive, is a way to discern whether your practice is rightly aligned. Wrong work atrophies under the influence of the light of self-observation and through the denial of identification with it. Other elements come into play, like thought selection and inner separation, but a good deal of power exists in the light of observing I. The idea of nothingness is closely connected to humility. Being critical or severe with yourself will not bring you realization of this fact. Only objective self-observation over a long period of time will reveal to you through scale and relativity and the artifice of false personality your condition of nothingness. You can't force yourself to feel this. It is more in the nature of an epiphany, enlightened understanding. Through self-observation, which is meant to have 360-degree vision, observing negativity is easy and extremely important throughout the work life. But it is only one aspect of your condition that you must observe. There are plenty of neutral aspects in everyone's personality, even pleasant aspects. These are eyes of mechanical goodness. They are definitely easier to live with, but they are nonetheless mechanical. So observe them. You will learn from them as well. There are also authentic eyes of real goodness, and these are to be valued and protected. That you are able to observe and even prevent the expression of old negative eyes is an accomplishment, even if you are inconsistent at it. But you have said it yourself. These very strong identifications are convinced they are right and are firmly entrenched. That is the definition of identification. It is consequently understandable that when you usurp an entrenched characteristic, it leaves a vacuum, and something that you felt very attached to disappears, leaving you with that feeling of no bearings. Question. Upon observing something negative, for example, fear or anger, there is a sort of pain which often results. And as a result of the pain, observation ceases and eyes come like, "Oh no," or "I'm having a bad day," etc., as if they are buffering the pain. How can this be overcome? Response. When you are practicing self-observation, you must try to keep all emotional reactions to what you observe silent. If you're experiencing pain as a result of the observation, no development can result. You must observe impartially, uncritically, without identification. When eyes, in response to what is being observed, begin to appear, you must not let them speak. Question.
It seems like self-judgment is attached to many of my eyes.
Response. This is a paradox. While you remain uncritical in your observation of yourself, you must at the same time have some sense or taste of discernment about what is right and what is wrong work. The nature of the eyes that you observe must be recognized before you can proceed to separate from those that are wrong work. If your question is, how do you remember to observe yourself? The motivation comes from sincere desire to change. If everything is fine, that desire for change is less. My advice would be to put aside trying to practice self-remembering for now. Focus on practicing self-observation, which can function when things are fine or not. Just register with your observations what you see. This accumulation of insight and information is essential in forming the next step in your path on this way. This particular exercise is about observing how you allow yourself to mistreat others in your psychology, as well as singing sad secret songs. A quote from Nicole.
You must cultivate quite a new idea of your responsibility to yourself in this respect.
That is, having inner integrity in relation to the work, not allowing yourself to fall into sleep when you are by yourself. Nicole says,
We must handle a person we are working with as carefully and consciously in our inner thoughts and feelings as we do externally, from polite manners.
It is a good thing when self-observation works in this manner. In so many instances, it takes long-term, hard work to eliminate the illusions of sleep. Sometimes, the illumination you receive when you observe yourself objectively and the force of the work ideas dissolve wrong work on the spot. Just be sure that it has been vanquished and isn't hiding. It isn't possible to work on everything at the same time. Then again, each idea is attached to another idea, and so on. The work will lead you if you let it. If you don't try too hard to force results. So begin where you first observe yourself and what you observe. Applying the work knowledge and practices to these observations will lead you. Question. Would you please expand upon the statement made by Nicole? You can observe your thoughts but not attitudes. Also, a thought does not necessarily make you act, but an attitude does, without your knowing anything about it. Response. You can observe an eye, a thought, that is critical of someone, for instance. The underlying attitude that created the eye is firmly planted in false personality and is not differentiated from it. A thought can come into your mind and pass through it without having an impact that would result in action. An attitude is presupposed, invisible in the personality you would ascribe to yourself. Personality is full of attitudes which create action. For example, feeling inferior is an attitude that creates all kinds of behaviors and eyes that can be easily observed. Question. I have observed that the exercise of refusing to go with the first reaction makes it possible to see these eyes and allows one the possibility of raising them.
This has been valuable for me.
Response. It is getting to the point of being able to refuse to go with your first reaction that is the hard labor of doing the work. It is an accomplishment every time you can do this. It is exactly through the process of the work that you can learn to function at the highest level of your being. That begins with self-observation. Do you understand that self-observation is an ongoing process? Do you know that the quality and character of self-observation changes and evolves as you do? Do you understand the nature of self-observation? Do you understand the purpose of self-observation? What are you watching when you observe? Do you recognize changing consecutive states in response to external events? Have you observed negativity in yourself without justifying or identifying? Have you observed many eyes in yourself? Any contradictions? Do you understand what it means to be identified with yourself? What is your biggest obstacle in your practice of the work? Remembering to? Finding time? Resistance from false personality? Skepticism? Impatience for results? Question.
I used the word entangled intentionally because in my self-observations I seem to be noticing this more. For example, I often question my motives before acting now and ask, is it pride? Are you looking to be recognized? Do you really want to know? Is it your intention to be helpful? Often, I think I see a combination of eyes at work at the same time. Sometimes I get the feeling that a sincere I initiates the thought or insight, and the achiever-doer muscles in wanting to take credit or to be recognized. I hope this makes some kind of sense to you because I find it very confusing.
Response. That is a definite work experience. In the beginning, all of the eyes are clamoring at the same volume, but you have perceived and experienced the phenomenon in the work. Some intuition, buried conscience, knows that a sincere I initiated the thought. Then, mechanical, habitual, accusing, challenging, undermining, distorting eyes all speak up in turn. Challenge them back. And do question your motives. It is one of the most essential elements in the work. Stay in touch with the small part of you that has verified that your motive was pure. The false eyes will fade away because they will be robbed of their power as they become known to you and you recognize their falsehood. Remembering that it is not the way of self-denial, but of understanding. As you know, understanding is defined in the work as the result of knowledge and being. Self-observation gives you knowledge on how to create being. You have a very important opportunity in what you have been experiencing. You say the emotional feeling is separated from the thoughts that have aroused these feelings. The thoughts are only eyes, and separating from the emotional feeling that they invoke is what we work very hard to be able to do. To have experienced this spontaneously is an insight and maybe an organic understanding of that condition of inner separation that can help to know what you are aiming at. It is freedom from identification. To remain objective during observation takes practice, it may help you to separate the observing eye from your personality's manifestations by referring to them in your observations as it, rather than taking them as yourself. For instance, it, meaning the mechanical, automatic personality that you call yourself, is irritable. It feels successful. It is tired. It doesn't like. It thinks that people should. Some people find this exercise helpful. Contempt for self is identified. Critical observation, which is the wrong way to practice this most essential exercise in the work. Self-observation must be done uncritically in order for the results to be in keeping with work aims. This accomplishment must be worked at as well. The ability grows with practice. Reach higher, past your responses to seeing, to unobstructed seeing. Reach deeper, beneath vanity, false personality, and inner considering to see what motivates them. The difference between I and myself that you are questioning is the difference between the emergence of observing I and the myself of acquired personality. Teachings of Inner Transformation by Rebecca Nottingham. Divided attention. Question. We've given ourselves a task where we sense our body, our right hand, while we listen or talk with another, or even just while we do our job. We find we can have an overall awakened sense with this divided attention, but it quickly turns into a time when attention begins to switch back and forth between hand and subject. Are these mini identifications? Would this be the time to stop the task and come back, or try to work through it? Response. The purpose of these exercises in divided attention is to prove that divided attention exists. It is possible. It is actually a big accomplishment to verify divided attention, even if it happens only in small doses, and it will come in small doses for a very long time. The ability to divide your attention for longer periods of time comes with practice. However, you have already proven that you can divide your attention. You no longer need to waste this effort on any pointless activity. Now you need to direct one part of your attention not toward your body or any other external thing, but inward toward observing your own psychology, while the other part stays engaged in the world. When you first direct your attention inward, try only to observe what is going on, to register negative states, incongruities, inner considering, vanity, inner talking, insincerity, etc. Try not to react, criticize, or judge what you observe. This is the beginning of psychological transformation, to see your own psychology in action, to know thyself. Read and study what the work teaches about sleep, multiplicity, mechanicalness, and all else one must observe and verify internally. Each observation is a step in the growth of real I, so don't waste the effort of dividing your attention on externals. Observe yourself with your divided attention. Before a person learns that there is a practice called divided attention, and before they can understand how to use this practice to see within themselves objectively, No such idea exists in them, and there is something other than what they call I. When I teach someone to separate their thought process into two different streams of direction, if I do not keep them on the right path, in the right direction, this dichotomy in their mind can seem just like a schizophrenic state. That is, they lose their sense of themselves. Those here can attest to the difficulty of this stage. That makes me responsible for seeing to it that each student passes through this stage undamaged and can progress to fulfillment in the work. Working with divided attention, not specifically related to self-observation, is a waste of time. It can be a subject of fascination for the psychology, and many people will prefer to remain at this kindergarten stage of practice rather than apply what has been learned to themselves. Continuing to practice exercises of divided attention without using that divided attention to observe yourself is a wasted effort. Once you can divide your attention, then turn that part of it to psychological work practices that can get you somewhere beyond dividing your attention. No matter what other work efforts you make, if you are not practicing the psychological exercises regularly of true self-observation, inner separation and non-identification, the stop exercise, external considering, then no growth can happen. Divided attention precedes and it is necessary for self-observation, but it is not self-observation. You cannot observe yourself without dividing your attention, but self-observation is a specific practice in and of itself. The beginning of divided attention is realizing that your attention goes in one direction only, outward, and that you live only in response to external stimuli. The I that can recognize this is the first I of divided attention. The point of the effort is that through realization and practice, you can now have more than one perspective. For instance, the practice of seeing a tree and seeing yourself seeing a tree is useful only so far as it confirms that one can have divided attention. The aim is to take part of the attention that is normally directed outward, engaging in life, and turning that attention inward to see your behavior and the psychology that generates it from an objective perspective. If you can do this, then you are using divided attention in order to practice self-observation. The aim of self-observation is to uncritically observe your psychology and your behavior in relation to the work knowledge. The work tells us our behavior is governed by mechanics, that we are asleep, and furthermore, that we do not know that we are asleep. The overall purpose of self-observation is awakening. In awakening, we see what motivates our behavior. We learn how to become intentional, self-transcendent and authentic. The work begins with dividing one's attention. If you have had no experience in this practice, try the following. While being aware of your external experience, become concurrently aware of your inner state. This internal awareness is the beginning of self-observation. Question. I recall Ouspensky saying that in the practice of divided attention, the attention is shared between the observer and the observed. Response. Divided attention keeps us aware of our external circumstances while noticing our inner states. The central issue is seeing what is going on within you so that A, you are not completely controlled by it, B, you begin to understand why you function the way you do, and C, you begin the process of changing your ways of being and reacting. Question: how is divided attention different from remembering oneself while looking at an external object? Where two lines are created, one toward the object and one toward the viewer. Response: part of your attention is not caught up in the external flow of events. It sees your internal psychological condition. The aim here is to see the psychological origins and motivations for your actions in the world. You have to start by seeing it in yourselves what the work tells you to observe. You must make many observations over a long period of time before you can even begin to get a picture of what you have to work on. Remember that the aim of the work is psychotransformation. Self-remembering is not an exercise, it is a state. Sometimes you'll unexpectedly find the state of self-remembering as a result of self-observation and inner separation. Sometimes, when this happens, when you're observing yourself and you see that your outward manifestations are all driven by false personality, and you have a moment of not knowing what you are besides that artificial personality, a sense of serenity and self-undefined may be experienced in that moment. You may encounter something more authentic than what you are observing. Real divided attention requires intentional effort for the specific purpose of self-observation. Trying to practice self-remembering while looking at an external object is a meaningless mind game. In order to remember oneself, it is first necessary to observe oneself and create enough real self to know what to remember. Therefore, in order to self-remember, you must first observe. The beginning of divided attention is realizing that your attention goes in one way only, outward, and that you live only in response to external stimuli. The eye that can recognize this is the first eye of divided attention. The point of the effort is that through self-realization and practice, you can now have more than one perspective. For instance, the practice of seeing a tree and seeing yourself seeing a tree is useful only so far as it confirms that one can have divided attention. The aim is to take part of the attention that is normally directed outward, engaging in life, and turn that attention inward to see your behavior and the psychology that generates it from an objective perspective. If you can do this, then you are using divided attention in order to practice self-observation. The aim of self-observation is to uncritically observe your psychology and your behavior in relation to the work knowledge. The goal is the formation of a permanent real I, which is the manifestation of the state of self-remembering, self-observation, founded on divided attention, creates the link between self-remembering and the development of real I. The purpose of these exercises in divided attention is to prove that divided attention exists. It is possible. It is actually a big accomplishment to verify divided attention, even if it happens only in small doses, and it will come in small doses for a very long time. The ability to divide your attention for long periods of time comes with practice. However, you have already proven that you can divide your attention. You no longer need to waste this effort on any pointless activity. Now, you need to direct one part of your attention not toward your body or any external thing, but inward towards observing your own psychology, while the other part stays engaged in the world. When you first direct your attention inward, try only to observe what is going on, to register negative states, incongruities, inner considering, vanity, inner talking, insincerity, etc. Try not to react, criticize, or judge what you observe. This is the beginning of psychological transformation. To see your own psychology in action, to know thyself. Read and study what the work teaches about sleep, multiplicity, mechanicalness, and all else one must observe and verify internally. Each observation is a step in the growth of real I, so don't waste the effort of dividing your attention on externals. Observe yourself with your divided attention. Question: why should one begin with practicing divided attention? It has been my experience that one must first be able to direct their attention rather than having it taken away from them, daydreaming, identification, etc. So how can you practice divided attention if you don't have real attention? Response: of course, everyone has some degree of attention. It's just that it's scattered and constantly changing directions. But people do focus on work, on reading, entertainment, hobbies, etc. all the time. It may not be intentional, but it is directed. What the work asks you to do is to focus part of it on one single thing, your inner reality. If you want to do pale exercises, like seeing how long you can focus your attention on the second hand of your watch, you will indeed verify that it is nearly impossible to keep your thoughts from wandering for even a minute or two. It shouldn't take more than once or twice to learn that lesson. But what if, for the sake of experimentation, you intentionally and repeatedly turn some bit of your attention that you can control toward the same thing? Starting as an awareness of your inner state in the context of your outer circumstances at the moment. Maybe you're meeting someone new when you remember to observe your inner state. For a moment or two, you see yourself smiling, shaking hands, talking, etc. And at the same time, you are aware that inside you are feeling nervous or insecure, superior, inconvenienced, delighted, interested, afraid, sexually attracted, totally bored, or any other possibility. The work asks you to note your state. This indeed requires great effort. That is why it's called the work. But it is possible to do it. Practice self-observation in this manner. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can verify it yourself through your own experience. Of course, you have to make the effort of self-observation repeatedly in order to build something strong enough inside you to observe yourself as a regular activity. This will take much work and a long time, so evaluate your aim in undertaking the work. If you decide to do this work, your efforts will create a response that enlightens you. Question: I think the idea is that as I pay attention to my surroundings, I'm less absorbed by my internal mental world, not wasting energy in imagination, because it is hard to do both at once. Response: you seem to be stuck in the first movement of self-observation, which is divided attention. This has no value except in application to the observation of your internal state. This work is about your internal mental world. It requires that you place your attention there. In doing this, you are not in imagination. You are just beginning to observe, which is not absorption. In the beginning of the work, there is a dangerous stage. When you instruct a person on how to practice divided attention and self-observation, This condition of divided attention and self-observation, if not done with very exacting parameters, can be schizophrenic inducing. So, I would ask you please take a very long time in practicing and understanding the work before deciding what to share and how to share it with others. Before a person learns that there is a practice called divided attention, and before they can understand how to use this practice to see within themselves objectively, no such idea exists in them that there is something other than what they call I. When I teach someone to separate their thought processes into two different streams of direction, if they do not stay on the right path, aimed in the right direction, this dichotomy in their mind can seem just like a schizophrenic state. That is, they lose their sense of themselves. Those here can attest to the difficulty of this stage. This makes me responsible for seeing to it that each student passes through this stage undamaged and can progress to fulfillment in the work. Right, I'm going to wrap it up right there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Now, I don't know, I noticed that there was repetition, and I couldn't work out if that was because it had just been printed twice, or if there were subtle nuances between the texts, that although the bulk of it was repeated, there were nuances within that text. I don't know. So I just continued. The next bit is still Teachings of Inner Transformation by Rebecca Nottingham. This is Identification coming up next, but I'm going to do that. I'll be back tomorrow with that one. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and I'll see you tomorrow.